Hey there, how's it going? This is Mike Slack with Avio Consulting. We just went live with our broadcast here. We're going to give it about 2 minutes before we get started to allow time for all the attendees to hop on. So in about 2 minutes, we'll get started with the presentation. So thanks to everyone who's joining. I see a lot of folks jumping in here on the call. Excited to see you all here and look forward to sharing this content with you in just a few minutes. Also, if you're jumping in on the call, just a couple things to note. We'll be doing Q&A at the end, but you can ask questions at any time. You can also chat by using the Q&A or the chat features down there at the bottom of the Zoom call. So at any time, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, please feel free to do so down there at the bottom of the Zoom interface. All right, thanks again for everyone who's joining in. We still have more folks who are jumping into the webinar. Great to see. We're going to get started in about 1 minute. We're right here at 11:02, so let's give it one more minute for folks to join in, then we'll get started. All right. All right, so we're at 11:03, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Start off just by saying thank you to everyone who's jumping into this webinar. We've got an hour scheduled for this. We might take all that time, we might take a little bit less time, we'll see, but really glad that you're here with us. This is Accelerating Digital Evolution, an Avio webinar series. So our goal is to see if we can provide some help back to the community by sharing some best practices that we've developed around the Appian COVID-19 response management app. And so that's what the focus is going to be today. If we'll take a look at the next slide, we'll just run through the agenda real quick. We'll introduce the team that's helping to prepare and deliver this content. We'll describe a little bit the background of the Appian application, why it was put together, what it's supposed to do, and who's supposed to be using it. Then we'll tell a little bit about the backstory of some requested modifications that came through to that application from some of our contacts in the healthcare space, and then how we responded to those requests for modifications, and then a demo of what those new features are. We'll look at the next slide, and really quickly, we've got Jordan Nichols, who's our marketing lead, who's running the Zoom webinar from behind the scenes. So thank you, Jordan. I'm Mike Slack. I'm the VP for Sales and Marketing for Avio Consulting, and Matt Bach is our Senior Appian Developer. So just 30 seconds on Avio. We're an IT and software consulting firm that focuses on digital evolution. We work with enterprises who are struggling with the information silos and the manual processes of the past. They're seeing their competitors move faster, adapt more quickly in a more agile manner. And they know that we're living in a world where it's not just the big eating the small, but the fast eating the slow. And so they want to rapidly change and adjust to their environment, and they're using modern application practices to do so. And that's what we help with our clients through that journey. We do that through a couple different products and partnerships and development skills. And so one is API-led integration with our partnership with MuleSoft. Another is low-code application development and business process management through our partnership with Appian. We also work with HashiCorp for DevOps, security, and infrastructure as a code, and then general custom development work as well. So that's a little bit about us, and we're going to jump right in now with Matt taking it away and looking at Appian's application that they put out there to help enterprises who are struggling to respond to COVID-19 and how they manage information, employees, related to all that. So Matt, take it away.
Thank you, Mike. So what we're looking at right now is a version 2.0.1 of Appian's application. It's got what I would consider 3 primary actions. It would be volunteering to help and providing help to those who are requesting it. That could be like picking up groceries or something like that, not necessarily related to the virus, just in the interest of social distancing. There is the ability to report incidents that would be more based around actual exposure to the virus, and maybe if someone thinks that they might become sick because they were exposed. Opting in with the My Health status functionality allows a user to self-report how they're doing, whether they're ill or not. And then secondarily, you've got resources that can be accessed and managed by what's called the command center users. So we see the command center, this is that landing page essentially, and the command center users would maintain a list of resources that are accessible by the entire organization. That would be helpful links about policies, maybe things on like how to log into your computer remotely, and FAQs that the organization is going to have. And they're also able to maintain a list of the state of the various facilities that an organization might have if there's more than one location. So in terms of what we did to the application after talking to some of our contacts in the healthcare space, particularly the individual I was in conversations with said that she works in occupational health, which is a division of a hospital typically that's like a nurse for the nurses. They need to take care of all the hospital's associates and make sure they're typically healthy and up to date on vaccinations and that type of thing. And right now during the COVID-19 response, they are chiefly in charge of making sure they know how everybody's doing, who's sick, who's not, when they can return to work, and what the status of their test results may be, if they have reported that they think they're positive for COVID-19 or that they think they've got it. So to implement those changes, we primarily focused on a streamlined user experience that focused on that incident management piece, who's sick and why, and maybe if they have impacted others. Those incidents were redesigned to minimize the time spent collecting information. Her current process, just given how fast they've needed to respond to COVID-19, is that they've created Microsoft forms and are tracking the state of their associates' health in a spreadsheet. And all that information comes in over the phone. They've set up a hotline because that's what IT is able to do for them at this time. So their small team of about 4 is taking hundreds of phone calls, and they are working 24-hour shifts. And each phone call can take up to 20 minutes with the way that the forms are structured, the lack of validations, and just how difficult it can be to enter information onto their current solution. So again, wanting to minimize the time spent collecting that information for this team. Greater focus was placed on the individual patient information. The original Appian implementation, and I can show this shortly as well, focus more on like what's the title of the incident, what's the theme of what's going on here. But when it comes to the occupational health team and healthcare, the focus is more on the individual patients. They want to make sure that they are looking for individual patients, keeping track of an individual patient's incident, not duplicating incidents, and taking care of them start to finish. So beyond that, reporting was also restructured to make sure that directors and VPs can keep tabs on the incoming responses. One of the primary items of interest is like, was PPE being worn at the time that they were reported being exposed, those types of things. They want to look in aggregate at those particular question responses. So the reporting was altered to reflect that. So to do this, we started from the 2.0.1 version of the application. Appian's releasing typically every 2 weeks. Currently they're on 3.0, and I would expect that would continue to iterate. But that's what we began our work from. So I'll show those 2 versions side by side and show the differences. All the changes that we made were done in approximately a week and a half. That was, of course, facilitated by Appian's low-code capabilities and our own internal Appian expertise. I would say also that our CI/CD best practices helped, particularly as I was developing, using the concept of test-driven development and then coupling that with automated front-end testing made it so that I didn't have to retest things and helped me get things out faster. And I think that primarily helped contribute to the week and a half turnaround on this. We also use source code management and Appian's ADM tools to track the work that we're doing, and then Docker containers to test code, and then in the instance of today, I'm using a Docker container to show what the old version of the app looks like, so I can have them side by side. So that all factors into how we responded. Before I jump into what the application looks like, I'll outline who I'm logged in as, and that's a command center user. Give her the name Carla in this instance. She essentially will administer the application, and members of her team would do the same. This would be applicable to that occupational health team that I was mentioning earlier. They would all be command center users. They, like I said, are collecting information from hospital associates. There's not going to be an immediate, I think, ability to train hospital workers on how to self-report, although those capabilities do still exist. In our version of the application, it's just going to be the occupational health team is more focused on speeding up how quickly they're collecting information and minimizing the amount of churn over, relogging incidents, working with the same patient more than once, and being able to transfer assignment of incidents to their team members, which they're currently not able to do. And then, of course, like I said, the hospital associates can self-report. That's something that they would be trained up on later. Hopefully, once the command center gets more time by what's freed up from this application, they can focus on training the various locations for the hospital on how to self-report. So with that, I'll jump into the walkthrough of what we did. And give me a second to get another screen shared. Share screen. Yes. Okay, sorry about the delay on that. So what we're looking at here is a streamlined version of what I was showing before, and specifically this involves the availability to report the incident. That's the first thing that the teams could be focused on. They've got the ability to still maintain resources that the rest of the organization can look at. This will come in handy once they train up the rest of the organization on how to use this and how to self-report. And then the ability to look at facilities and which of theirs are open and that type of thing. I will drill into the reporting of an incident and show the customizations we made here. So before I go completely into this, I'll show the original version. So let's say in Appian's version of the application, originally 2.0.1, we see what type of incident are we reporting. They provided capabilities to expand the type of incidents beyond this. We've got a title, and this isn't super patient focused. So what we did was take what the current process is for the contact I was talking to and implement it onto this. So now we see that we're more focused on reporting symptoms. We're more focused on what the scenario was when the associate may have been exposed, the particular location that they were affiliated with. We include who's reporting it, and then maybe additionally who's been impacted. And then very importantly, and not something necessarily that an associate will report right away, but what the test results are for the individual, because this helps clear them to return to work again, or to indicate that they need more help and more attention from the occupational health team. So I'll fill a few of these things out. Let's say the patient that is called into the occupational health team reports a cough and a temperature. They're likely to be having the COVID-19 virus. They were wearing PPE, which is fortunate. I've obfuscated some of the locations. We'll just say location 1. Additional details. Let's fill this in. The associate contracted, or they think they contracted the virus while treating a patient that was confirmed to have the virus. That patient was tested and returned positive. The impact of having been exposed is that this associate will need to avoid treating other patients until a determination about their health can be made. So getting these test results back on this particular associate is going to be critical. We want to put in a request for testing with this individual now, and over the phone, Carla may work with this individual to get in touch with the department that can apply that test. So let's say they're pending test results. This is critical in terms of follow-up. We'll assign it to another command center user and make sure that that Carla can focus on other new incoming cases. Calista doesn't have as much on her plate. I'll fill in some information about the individual. And so all this helps make sure that the occupational health team can stay in touch with this particular person and make sure that they know exactly what the state of their health is over time. So we ordered the test. They're restricted from work right now. One additional change we made is in the interest of helping log test results and progress notes in the application, which are two directly applicable use cases for this occupational health team. Added some document type classifications that can be uploaded to this incident as more information is collected. I'll leave that blank for now. So that's it. Besides my talking over it, that's all that's needed now to log information for this patient. And ideally, that cuts this 20 minutes down to a fraction of that time and helps the occupational health team move through their incidents faster, maybe get away from 24-hour shifts as well. Beyond this, I will show where that information shows up. So this is the new incident report. This shows a focus on all of the questions that were being asked. So I've defaulted it to are experiencing symptoms, PPE, and when the incident occurred. Let's say we're looking for a particular person we just took a phone call from. So here he is. We can see what his responses were in line. This is going to be helpful, again, for those higher level users. They may not be so focused on individual associates, but they have the ability to drill down if they want. And the occupational health team can come here as well to check this out. If they do find something of interest, they can drill into the user's incident report and update it as needed. And then while I'm looking at this, I'll also show, so here's our new version, and here's what the older version looked like. So this is more focused on the overall health of the organization. We've got the incident locations and the statuses of, criticality in the incidents there, what incidents have been occurring recently, and the division across what their current statuses are. So we changed that to be not only include those statuses, but also all those questions being asked. So the focus is squarely on what information are we collecting, and our key data points, rolling up that information so it's easier to see. So beyond that, I would like to show how to add information or questions, I guess in this case, to an incident, which we think might be a common need for users of this version of the application. So to that end, I will log in as an administrator of the application that has the permission to make those sorts of changes and to access the Appian database. So let me get a window open for that.
So Matt, we could say this is jumping into the really technical portion of this is a little bit more peeling the onion back and saying how in the world did you make all these changes in a week and a half? And so that's what you're showing us now is another example of that, right?
Yes.
What, as you jump into this and we get logged in and set up, can you walk through kind of what the basic steps are? Like, what are all the things you need to do just really quickly, 1 minute high level? What are the changes that you've got to make? I think it starts at the database level, right?
Sure thing. Yeah. Before I get too into the weeds, I think you could consider it a 3-step process. You would start lowest level with your data points. Again, with this big focus on the data they're collecting, you would add a data point in the right spot. You would update Appian's backend to connect directly to that data point and make sure it knows about that data point. And then the final step would be updating the front end. So it's kind of this 3-step process.
Cool, thanks.
All right, so let me get to that database first. So to put this in context again, real quick, let's say we want to say when the symptoms started occurring. So the incident itself occurred on April 10th today. The symptoms may have started occurring yesterday. We want a field for that. So that's what I'm going to be adding. I'll go to the table that I know is relevant to this data, which is the incident table. ITA incident. All right, so here's our table structure. This, for example, is where that incident date was. I'm going to add a column after, or let's say before that. So we'll say after wearing PPE or FID. I want this to be symptom start date. Ooh, I think I already have it. Have it prepared for the demo. Excellent. So it's there. I just double clicked. So now that we have, that's all it takes to add the data point into the table. I use the PHP MyAdmin functionality that comes with the Appian Cloud offering. I will go now into the relevant data type, which is, again, incident. I'll call it symptom start date. We know it's a date type. Save this. So what this is doing right now is telling Appian that its interfaces and sail language can access that data point that was added, essentially. So it looked for it in the database, it found it, changes were saved. This is a valid change that can be made. And now I know that I want to update the incident box. So I'm going to search for my box objects. And drill into my incident details. I can use the drag and drop interface for this to make this even easier. I'll look for the date, component, let's drop it on top of the occurred date. And I'll call it, when did symptoms start? To try to help prompt the occupational health team to ask the right questions. And then that display value would be the same thing that I entered in the database. Let's see if I can. There it is. RI record symptom start date. And I want to save it back to that as well when they input that data. And that's about it. Now that I've done this, I can go back to the form that Carla was using, and after interacting with it, Appian will go check on the latest version of the interface and put the field on the form. I will say also that I want it to be required because this is important to know. I just made that change to the back end, so I'll interact with the form again, and now it's required. That was about it. That's all you've got to do in order to update kind of the core functionality that we strove to implement. Mike, does that take it start to finish for you? Is there anything else you'd like to show, or we maybe jump into Q&A?
I'd say let's get ready here in just a minute to jump into Q&A. And so we've got about, so really excited, we've got about 25 folks here on the webinar. So would love for any of those folks who are here, if you have any questions, if you'd like to ask them, you can do that with the Q&A feature. And so those questions will pop up for us. And it looks like we've had one question that came in earlier, and any other questions, please hop in and ask those now. I guess one question that I would ask really quickly is, Matt, for somebody who is maybe relatively new to the Appian platform, what are the kind of skill sets that they would need to be able to make the kind of changes that you just did? What either level of developer or level of experience do you think is needed to go in there and make these kinds of adjustments in the speed that you made them?
I think that having a background in relational databases is very helpful. Knowing how to data model and understanding relationships between relational tables is a skill that you're going to need for any Appian application you're going to make. Being able to know inherently, like what I was looking at in the PHP MyAdmin screen for how Appian's cloud databases present their information. That's, I think, a very helpful skill to have. Once you've got an understanding of how data works and how data typing works, Appian has a lot of tools that make it easy for you to carry that up to the front end. That's very good, like you saw, at binding changes made in a database quickly up to the front end. It was only like a 3-step process to get that going. It was already ready to go. So yeah, I would say focus on those database skills. Secondarily, if you have any UI experience, I think that helps reduce any churn there might be on, like, where does this go? Why would I set up a page to look like this? Appian does have a lot of boilerplate, if you're going into design mode, interfaces that you can click, like start from a template, and then it will automatically generate components for you that kind of look like what we're just looking at. And let me know if you want me to share that, but I'm just bringing up the QA slide right now.
Cool. So
I think that UI experience and database experience are pretty critical. That's, I guess I would say when I started with Appian years ago, that's what I had, and I was able to jump in pretty easily with those skills.
So the next question that's come in is Appian's backend agnostic as long as it's a relational database? Is it backend agnostic? It is.
I would say not maybe 100%, but I've used Microsoft SQL. You can connect to a database, any kind of database really, and set up your own connections for that. Back in the day, that was like kind of a long process where you had to go through support and such, but in recent years, they've made it that you can set that connection up yourself. I've personally used Microsoft SQL. There's definitely documentation around the specific databases that you're able to use. So it is more agnostic beyond MySQL and Microsoft SQL, I can say that.
Got it. I mean, this is, I mean, it's clearly a little bit of a loaded question, but what would have the time, if you were kind of building a custom application from scratch and you're trying to make the kind of changes that you made really so quickly, you know, what's the time comparison of something like that versus how quickly you were able to do it here with the platform?
I would say you're kind of consulting answer. You're really only as good as your requirements. Like if you put the work in up front to make sure you understand exactly what's needed, that helps a lot. I've been in situations where that wasn't necessarily done. And that kind of hurt the project a little bit. So start with good requirements and make sure you know what the user wants to see, focus on, like, I would like to be able to do this. So that kind of standard as a user sort of language that you see on most Agile best practice references. Start with that and then break your work down. And then once you are ready to dive into the application, there are ways I've found that help to accelerate the development of something. I've even used Appian's Quick App functionality to generate like boilerplate application objects. There are, for example, groups that any application is going to have, like an administrator group and an all users group. Doing that will take care of that for you. You're going to want, a site object. There's a lot of like skeleton building that you may be able to get out of the way by use of a Quick App. Once you build that Quick App up, you delete what you don't need and you move on from there. There are best practices around what that skeleton, kind of looks like. And if you're building it from scratch, it's going to take longer. So that's maybe a pro tip. Start with something that builds that out for you. Then you've got that skeleton to build on, kind of like I had a skeleton to build on with the COVID-19 app. So maybe that's little tips to accelerate.
Yeah. So we've got 2 more questions in here right now. So the first one is, where is this hosted, on-prem or in the cloud? And if it's in the cloud, is it on something like AWS? So how's this hosted?
Well, kind of both. The new version of the application I was showing is hosted in the cloud, and Appian works with AWS. I don't know necessarily where the data center is for us, but that Avio demo environment is a cloud environment. The older version of the application is hosted locally in a Docker container. So that's running on my computer right now. The COVID-19 application, can run in either type of environment. And then I'll actually move on to the next slide. If you visit link 3 to learn more about Appian's COVID-19 application, it explains how you can have an on-premise or cloud instance of this application. Appian's providing cloud instances because they're easier. It makes more sense to spin those up for new customers. You can get them access within a matter of hours rather than helping them build up the hardware needed to do that. But that's a long answer, I guess, to say both.
Good. Yeah, appreciate it. Next question is Appian able to integrate with existing CI/CD platforms like Jenkins and Bamboo?
It is. And we use that internally. How about I share that real quick?
Sure.
So while I'm bringing that up, yes, it does. I've used it with both. We're currently using Jenkins internally to track our pipeline and the state of the builds on our various branches that we're working on. Let me get to it. All right, I'll share this. It's portion, share. So here's our Jenkins server. This is a quick little application like I built out. It's kind of a proof of concept. Back to what I was talking about earlier, I started with a quick app for this. It's an application designed to send text messages. So what we're looking at is that on the development branch, we've got passing builds. On the master branch, we've got passing builds. Wasn't always the case. We've ironed out kinks and have since had success. Again, back to using third-party tools or open source tools. Here it is right here. I think any way you use Jenkins in the past, you could probably expect to use with Appian.
Got it. Great. Thank you. Next question is, does Appian utilize a thick client studio application, or is it configuration, is it entirely web-based?
It's entirely web-based. That isn't to say that you necessarily, if you're using more of a CI/CD approach, you wouldn't use solely the web-based application. You would be able to use an IDE, and then I should probably link everyone to the ADM tools as well. Essentially, let me put this in a little bit better context by sharing the developer view. Okay, so what we're looking at here is that Appian's kind of out of the box IDE. The sail editor, I think, is the general term for it. So this is editing an interface. The sail language will typically start with like abang. This says I've declared some variables, and then you can use that same abang language to add something like a paragraph field, and that'll pop up in real time on your interface. So we would say like label 5 demo. So what you're working with here, all your changes are reflected in real time on their web editor, basically. And you use this to make changes to Appian objects that exist in applications. I'll go into what an application looks like. I was just
As
using the
you're,
command. Go ahead.
oh, sure. I was just going to say, as you're jumping into this, it's clear that you can use some of the more drag and drop style features to make these changes, but then also there are more code-based ways to make these changes as well. Is that right?
That's right. I didn't speak to that directly, but that is accurate. What I'm looking at is the more code-based way. This is when the sail language was first introduced. It was all code-based. In recent years, they've added the design mode. This allows for drag and drop, kind of like what I was doing before. And then this gives you a list of all the components you have to work with. If I wanted to, I would say drag a new paragraph on in an easier way. You know, this is a good way to do that. This is something I use both. Having had a lot of experience with the platform, I think it's really easy to use this to restructure the layout of an interface. There's a concept of like columns, for example, that I think moves along faster if you use the drag and drop. Whereas if I was doing this in code, I'd have to very, very carefully copy paste things. So there's great use cases for both. You get more customization with the underlying code, but I think this speeds along your actual UI, high level development. I think that answers your question. Web IDE.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, two more questions have popped up, and just want to make sure folks know that following this, we are going to send out an email with a link to the video recording as well as the deck that we shared, so that you have all of the links that Matt has talked about, and possibly we'll add one or two more, like the ADM tool. So next question is, does Appian have its own testing framework, or do you use something like Selenium?
I would say sort of. It has testing built in for its expression rule objects. Let me open up one of those real quick. No, I know I keep touching my face. I'm all self-conscious about that right now. I'm trying not to do that.
You got to social distance your fingers from your face.
I know. I just keep them on the desk. All right. So this is an expression. I don't know that I necessarily would have put a link in an expression, but that's beside the point. Test cases can be added to these expressions. I would say I would want this test case to be run without errors. And we see that it's passed. I can create this. And then these can be run in aggregate, either for a particular application. You could run the tests that you put on your expressions for a single application, or you could do them across an entire environment to check the health of your overall, or to check the health of all of your applications at once. When it comes to front-end testing or other types of out-of-the-box testing, there isn't any. We've implemented our own framework using Cucumber at Avio that helps us do that front-end testing. And when I was talking about that earlier in the webinar, that's what I was referring to, is our framework that we built out that can click around on interfaces and automatically or test things as though it's a front-end user. But again, that's not something that's out of box with the product.
Got it. Cool. So I think we'll make this our last question, and then we'll wrap up here in just a minute. And I think we may have addressed part of this, but whenever you deploy your code, are you able to test in a lower environment first, or does it deploy straight to the production environment?
That depends on how many environments you have. The typical Appian environment stack I've worked with is a dev environment, a test environment, a prod environment. I would generally recommend, even if you're also using Docker containers the way we are, that you put all of your developers together in the dev environment to make changes. This helps avoid merge conflicts later. It gets the merges out of the way up front. So once you're done developing, and a typical Appian stack without the CI/CD concepts that we use, you would do your unit testing, make sure things are good to go, and then you would move things to your test environment, have folks test there. That's where your QA typically would take place. I've had QA take place in dev. I don't totally recommend that. And then your UAT testing may take place in the test environment as well. Then things would move to production. If you've only got two environments, that becomes difficult. You find workarounds there. Maybe use Docker containers and such to help get out of each other's way. But that three stack environment is typical of most cloud, and I would say probably on-premise Appian instances.
Got it. Great. Well, Matt, thank you very much for all the work that you put into this, the application itself, the webinar and the presentation. So Jordan, also thanks to you for helping to organize this here on the back end for us. Again, I'm Mike, that's Matt, and Jordan. We're with Avio Consulting. Put this webinar together hopefully to help folks who are trying to figure out how to respond to cases or case management related to COVID-19 using the Appian platform, and also hoping to help folks trying to understand better what the Appian platform is and how is it used and how is it customized. So we'll send up some follow-up resources shortly. Like we said, a video recording of this webinar, as well as some helpful links, including how to get in touch with us. So thanks again to everyone for tuning in, and we'll look forward to chatting with you all if you have any interest in following up. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.